celebrating the unveiling of the State of the World's Fathers 2015 report. So to all of you, distinguished panelists, distinguished delegates and guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Thank you for offering your energy, your ideas, and our conversation today. We have a very impactful lineup for you today. Just to give you a sense of what and how I got involved in this, although I'm a reporter and journalist and anchor for MSNBC and NBC News, I have become involved outside of work in a topic that I think all of you care about so much, and that is gender equality. Not only with Planned International USA as an ambassador for them and their Because I'm a Girl campaign, but also with UN Women's He for She campaign as a spokesperson. And as you know, there are so many other organizations that are special to this cause, and many of you, not all of you, are involved in that in some form or fashion. So again, welcome to all of you. Today we will discuss the report, which is, 2 pounds. I went through most of it myself. I like pictures and graphics, and so if you have a chance later on, download it. There are also some copies over there to my right, so feel free, of course, to leaf through that. This is the first global report on the state of the world's fathers. We have some, as you can tell, sitting to my left and to my right, some fantastic speakers, and I can't wait to listen to what they have to say. We have Chelsea Clinton, who will be offering us opening remarks. We have a keynote also from Kate Gilmore, who is to my right. And then also we have Gary Barker, who will be presenting some of the data from the report itself. And then we will have a panel with some luminaries to finish this afternoon's exciting lineup. So that's what we're going to be doing today. And let me start by introducing somebody that's very special to this conversation, to the energy behind what needs to be, and that is gender equality. And that is Chelsea Clinton to my left. She is the vice chair of the Clinton Foundation, among many other things. And just to give you a little bit of her background, she works to drive the vision and work as well with the Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton Foundation. Over the past 13 years, the foundation has built partnerships with great purpose among governments, businesses, NGOs, and individuals everywhere to strengthen health systems in developing countries, fight climate change, expand economic opportunity in Africa, Latin America, and the United States, to increase opportunity for women and girls around the world and help Americans live healthier lives. And they also work to help advance the full participation of women and girls around the world. Chelsea leads the foundation's initiative, No Ceilings, the Full Participation Project. She, her husband Mark, and their daughter Charlotte live here in New York City, and I have heard Chelsea many a time speak on this very issue. So please, a very warm welcome to Chelsea Clinton.
Generous introduction, and I want to echo your gratitude for everyone who is here joining us today. I want to thank Kate Gilmore, the Assistant Secretary General and Deputy Executive Director of UNFPA, for being here, particularly as she stepped in at the last minute. As Babatunde unfortunately is not with us, we certainly send our thoughts and well wishes to him on a speedy recovery. It is so exciting, Gary, to be here with you. As we were talking about earlier, this effort launched at the Clinton Global Initiative in 2011, and so to see it come to fruition today is incredibly inspiring, and we at the Foundation have been so proud to be partners alongside you in this effort. As you will see, when I hope all of you do pick up a copy of the report or download it, the efforts and work and energies of many people went into producing this inaugural State of the World Fathers Report. And so I think all of us owe a debt of gratitude to the partners who have been working alongside Promundo in this effort, particularly Save the Children, Men Engage Alliance, Sonke Gender Justice, Rutgers, and everyone who contributed ideas, thoughts, and research. As you heard from Richard, I do live in New York with my husband and our daughter, Charlotte. I have spent a lot of time recently thinking about parenthood, given that I am myself a new parent, clearly not a father, but a mother. And I hadn't understood that one of the great joys of becoming a mother would be watching my husband become a father. And I am so grateful for his dedication, his support, his love, and the investments that he makes in our daughter every single day. We're very lucky and fortunate to know that his commitment to her is very much in both his and her best interest. So many parents and fathers around the world don't know that and don't understand that, and yet very much are able to make tremendous transformations in their own lives when they do come to understand it, as we saw so powerfully in the video that opened our conversation this afternoon. We often say at the foundation that data helps measure progress, but it also helps drive progress. And that's why I think this report is so tremendously important, because it makes an evidence-based case for why increasing the ability of fathers to engage in healthy, productive, positive ways for their children is not only morally the right thing to do, but the smart thing to do for fathers, for families, for communities, and for countries. Why is it the smart thing to do? Well, we know that engaged fathers are going to be healthier fathers. We know that positively engaged fathers now are happier fathers. We know that happier and healthier people are going to be more productive contributors to their country's economies. We know that when fathers are more engaged, that creates more time and space for women to be more engaged in work outside the home. Women still do 2 to 10 times as much caregiving and housework as men do. But we know when there's a greater balance, not only is that, again, good for children, they're more likely to believe that they themselves should grow up and be mothers and fathers who share responsibilities with their partners, but it's also, again, good for countries' economies. The entrance of women into the American labor force from 1970 to 2009 alone contributed $3.5 trillion to our GDP. Imagine what that would do for countries around the world, not only in the developing world, but also in the developed world. It's why we now have a name for the conversation that's happening in Japan, Abenomics. Prime Minister Abe knows that unless women enter the labor force, it will be very hard for Japan to even maintain its current status of living, much less continue to grow and flourish. So we know that having more opportunities for fathers to be engaged is not only good for fathers and their children, but good for our economies. And yet it's not only a shift in mindsets that has to enable this to happen, it's also a shift in policies and practices. And one of those policies and practices that this report advocates for, and that I could not agree with more strongly, is having more paid paternity leave. Now, almost every country in the world has paid maternity leave. Unfortunately, the United States is not one of them. The United States is one of only 9 countries that doesn't have paid maternity leave for mothers of new infants. But only 92 countries have paid paternity leave, and for most it's measured in weeks, not months. And yet, the report makes such a strong and powerful case for why paid paternity leave sends not only a strong philosophical message that parents have an equal stake in the nurturing and raising of their children from not only kind of the early days, but the early weeks and the early months, but that again, also it's in those countries' economic interests to have parents make those combined early investments. This also isn't just a conversation that's relevant to couples who are comprised of a father and a mother, as my family is, but also for families that are comprised of only one father or of 2 fathers. This conversation has relevance for everyone, and it is in all of our self-interests to ensure that more fathers have the same opportunities and support that I am lucky enough that my husband has to be the type of parent that I know he wants to be, and that I know Charlotte, our daughter, will benefit from him being. So I am tremendously grateful for all of the work that has gone into this report. I'm tremendously grateful for all of the work that this report will help inspire and push forward. And I'm looking forward to joining alongside many of you as we work to help our country's policies be what we believe are in the right interests of our families, but also to make these arguments on a global scale so that every child has the same opportunity that the beautiful children we saw in the video have to have their fathers engaged, supportive, and inspiring them all along the way. Thank you all very, very much.
Chelsea, thank you so much, and for your leadership with the Clinton Foundation as we work towards this equality, gender equality, and thank you for your opening remarks today as we unveil this new report. And now I'd like to move to Kate Gilmore, the Deputy Executive Director of the United Nations Population Fund. She has so graciously joined us today because the Executive Director was not feeling well, and it is absolutely an honor. I had the opportunity to speak with her a little bit earlier about her work. And for those of you who are not familiar with some of the great things that she has done, she has spent more than 20 years of strategic leadership working on social issues in her government, Australia, and in not-for-profit organizations. She started her career with her government and social work and community education roles. From 1986 to 1992, she was coordinator and then program development manager of the Royal Women's Hospital in Australia, where she pioneered programs on sexual assault, as well as developed a new human rights framework for sexual assault services in Australia. Stay with me. From 1992 to 93, she was CEO there of Broadmeadows Community Health Service, then Australia's largest community health service based in Melbourne, 93 to 96. And I'm going to stop just in a second. She was manager of the Division Community Care in the Royal Women's Hospital. A warm welcome here to Kate Gilmore. Stay awake, please. Not to do that, but I had to give her the credit where credit was due.
Thank you, Richard. I think you've strongly emphasised how old I am. And for that, I should be eternally grateful. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Chelsea Clinton, Mr. Gary Barker, distinguished panellists who will join us later, distinguished guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, today I am a man. Oh, okay, I'm not a man. Actually, I'm not very good as a man. I'm not much better necessarily as a woman, but I wish I was a man. In particular, I wish I was Dr. Babatunde Osontemiane, our Executive Director. He, of course, is very glad that I am not he, and that he is she. No, that doesn't help. Let me just say he is okay, but he has been travelling. He was in Johannesburg for the African Union Summit, and he's caught something on the trip back, and he sends his very real apologies. He was so looking forward to delivering remarks rather than handing over to me, and I am sorry. I know you were hoping for the Rolling Stones, and all you've got is a girl with a guitar. So let me continue in that spirit. Were he here, he would say just how proud UNFPA is and how delighted we are to take part in the launch of this groundbreaking milestone, incredibly important report. You know, we meet in the Trusteeship Council of the United Nations. Somewhere down the corridor, they're debating Syria. Somewhere over in another conference room, they're talking about climate change. Back behind us somewhere, they're discussing the demise or otherwise of certain unnamed currencies. And here in the Trusteeship Council, we're discussing fatherhood because it's equally important. Right. This is an historic report at an historic moment in an historic year. And it couldn't be more important for all of us to give this issue its due and arguably long overdue attention. You know, UNFPA is often thought of as more to do with motherhood, perhaps than fatherhood, but I can assure you that in motherhood, fatherhood is always involved. You don't have one without the other, at least at the very beginning. And we know that promoting from the get-go the full involvement of men in reproduction, in family life, in the raising and protecting of children, just as promoting the full involvement of women in community life, that hand in hand, they are the surest pathways to gender equality, the sounded methods for intimate peace and security, and the most sustainable platform, therefore, for inclusive development. World leaders, more than 175 countries, about 20 years ago, through the Cairo Platform of Action, affirmed that which is as relevant today when they said, and called upon member states worldwide to promote male involvement in the struggle for gender equality and male involvement in shared responsibility in all areas of family life, including reproductive health. And this wonderful, groundbreaking report, State of the World's Fathers, for whose authors we must truly congratulate for fantastic vision and important construction of public knowledge. You know, that report tells us that more than 80% of men at some point in their lives will be fathers, and that even more so, most men will have direct connections to children as well, as stepfathers, as uncles, as brothers. And yet the report also reminds us that women continue to do the majority of the caring labour, spending 2 to 10 times longer looking after children, despite the fact that today women make up 40% of the public workforce, the workforce outside the home. In other words, that's a double burden. And in no country as yet do men and women share that unpaid domestic and care work equally. This is unjust, it's unhealthy, and the consequential imbalance hurts men, women, and children. Women lose opportunities for self-actualisation, for work, for income. Domestic chores and family responsibilities keep girls out of school, which in turn worsens gender inequality and gender poverty. In fact, as this extraordinary publication reveals, men who report close, non-violent connections with children live longer. They have fewer mental and physical health problems. They're less likely to be dependent on drugs and more productive at work. But absent contact with the father, boys and girls, children, miss out from benefits as well, while men miss out on the humanity, the connectedness, the intimacy that only fatherhood offers. But we can change this, and for our children we must, and for their children's children we just have to. In close to 2/3 of the more than 130 countries in which UNFPA is present, we know that partnering with government and civil society, including faith-based leaders, to engage men and boys as husbands and partners and as futures husbands and partners makes a difference. We have the evidence that reaching men through fatherhood programs improves maternal and child health. We know that engaging fathers improves family communication, fosters joint decision-making, helps build healthier relationships based on mutual trust and respect. And ultimately, the evidence is clear that connecting with men about their support for their own partners and their responsibilities as caregivers leads to a greater appreciation, understanding and respect for gender equality and for human rights. You know, encouraging men to be good fathers is vital. But in that, ensuring men also understand they have a powerful role to play in transforming harmful gender norms, in promoting women and girls' empowerment and well-being, and in ending gender-based discrimination and violence, well, that's just essential. Men can, some are, and all should be, champions of women's and girls' human rights, supporting girls' access to education, working to end harmful practices such as child marriage and female genital mutilation, resisting actively gender-based violence. This is not ideologically sponsored speculation. It is a question of proven, evidence-based interventions. Husband schools we're developing in Niger, for example, and replicating elsewhere are showing that men's informed, more thoughtful and intentional involvement in sexual and reproductive health, including voluntary family planning, can make a real difference to their lives, to their own dignity, as well as to the lives of women, children, of families more broadly, and of communities. It matters that husbands and male partners shoulder the responsibility for planning of pregnancies, rather than obstruct or complicate women's access to contraceptives. It matters that men understand why free, prior, and informed consent is as much a human right in marriage as it is outside of marriage. It matters that men discuss with their peers what is the essence of being a man, so that destructive versions of masculinity are subverted and replaced with a manliness that is large enough to discard violence and domination and deep enough to encompass tenderness and vulnerability. You know, in every community, in every country, scattered across all levels of society, you find men and women working to uphold human rights for both men and women, to protect human rights between men and women, to take human rights of women and men from the public into the most intimate of places, from the courtroom to the bedroom. This affirms a universal truth that masculinity and femininity are not primal states. Humaninity is the primal state. And our conceptualisation, therefore, of this category of man has to be exploded out, just as we've done so for women. It's just too small, this conventional idea. It's a tiny box from which there are too many knock-out, knock-down exits. If you look after your children, you're not a man. If you pick up after yourself, you're not a man. If you cry, you're not a man. If you're raped, you're not a man. If you negotiate consensual sex, if you're not in charge, out you go. Look, any identity that's walled in by rigidities about either oneself or the other wrongly confines, and we can't afford this, wrongly confines our human possibility, erroneously distorts our human potential, and undermines the very essence of our talent and our gift, of our human diversity. And that's true for the boxed in, the boxed out, and the boxed about. Nowhere is this clearer than for young people. It's our investments in liberating young people that will define development for the years to come. With more young people alive than ever before, we must allow them to flourish instead of shackle them in socially constructed roles that impede their fuller potentials. It's not too late, but it's most certainly overdue for the world to make it our determination for gender equality, for equality between men and women, between mums and dads, a socially transmitted infection, a new STI, an STI for gender equality that engages and infects a larger, more diverse, inclusive community of both men and women in a deeper understanding that everyone's dignity is undermined when anyone's dignity is undermined, no matter the excuse. And for this to manifest material, we must see, celebrate, and enlarge the place of men as caregivers, the room inside masculinity for nurturing, and the concept of male talent as being perfectly capable too, in the kitchen and in the laundry room. I thank you.
Thank you, Kate, so much for your remarks today, the keynote address, and I'm sure all of you enjoyed it as much as I did. I learned a word today, humaninity. It's a good one. Hashtag humaninity along with hashtag SOWF, if you are listening right now. We now move into the presentation of the key findings of the report that we are here to celebrate, and I have the pleasure now of introducing our third speaker, and that is Gary Barker, the International Director for Promundo, sitting to my left and to the left of Chelsea. Now, if you know Gary, he is quite an energetic guy. Not only is the International Director and founder of Promundo, he's also an author of The State of the World's Fathers, one of them that put together this great two-pounder in front of me. He has conducted extensive global research and program development around engaging men and boys in gender equality and violence prevention. He is a leading voice for the worldwide effort to establish positive, healthy dynamics between men and women. He is also a TED Talker, which if you've had the chance to watch, it was a very invigorating speech. Gary is the co-founder of Men Care, a global campaign to promote men's involvement as equitable, non-violent caregivers, and also he is co-chair and co-founder of Men Engage, a global alliance of more than 400 NGOs and UN agencies working toward gender equality. So a very warm welcome to Gary Barker.
Thanks. I will start by thanking our distinguished guests here and co-sponsors of this, UN Women, UNFPA, our Men Care partners, Sonke, Save the Children, Rutgers, the Men Engage Alliance that we're thrilled to be part of as well, and the Clinton Foundation for being a partner in this as well. It's a bit daunting to go after these very, very dynamic presentations. So let me tell you first, why did we take some perfectly nice folks, lock them in the door, and make them write so many pages? And scour the world for the data that we could find on what's up with men. Quite simply because we felt it was about time. It's both about high time that we look at the roots of gender equality, and one of those is the huge inequality facing us in terms of who does the care work. You'll show my first slide there. The issue of who does this every day. And it is quite literally about who does the time to do this every day. We know that for the poorest women in the world, their triple time burden compared to men is one of the biggest challenges to them having the lives that they deserve. And while we've done lots of talking about the symptoms of gender equality, we think this is a topic that really takes us to the core issue. I'll go through a few of the data points in there, but I think before I should do that, as a father, I understood from talking to Kate that I am allowed under the UN Declaration of Human Rights to tell one story about my daughter, and she gave me permission to tell the story, and to show one picture over there. She's been training me now for 17 years, I would say, myself and my wonderful partner. We've been getting this very intensive parent training program called Nina. And a very important lesson came when she was about 5 years old. She saunters in her tutu, and I think she has the butterfly wings on the back. In spite of us trying all those gender equitable things, tutus and butterfly wings won out, and her wand, and she comes in. She was figuring out what my wife and I did for professions. My wife works in public health. It's a really clear profession. You help people who are sick, you prevent them from getting sick. And then my profession of gender equality, which to her was weird because boys and girls were obviously equal. Why would you even need that profession? Anyway, she saunters in saying, "So, Poppy, you've just been on a trip to talk to those men over there about why they should be involved in their children's lives." She does a little pirouette and then says, "But you missed my play on Friday." So this lesson of it's about time takes the wisdom of a 5-year-old to remind us really what is the core thing in all the pages here. It is, how do we drive toward a global goal of saying we need men to do 50% of the care work? And what does it take to get us there? That's why we wrote so many pages, because there's a lot of things that it takes to get us there. One, we, as Kate mentioned before, we say very clearly in the report that about 80% of the world's men will be biological fathers or are biological fathers. And we have to emphasize the word about because we don't know. We've been measuring a lot of things in women's lives. We've got fantastic data from the UN, from the No Ceilings Project. We don't know with precision how many men are fathers, because it's not been something, nor do we know in a standardized way the amount of time they spend in doing the caregiving every day. One of the things that has to come out, we think as a recommendation, is the things that matter are the things you count. And we do have to figure out in our annual states of things how we count how much men are doing this to achieve this global goal of 50% of the care work being done by men. Next, please. It is no surprise, but it's worth writing 25 pages about, that fathers matter in the lives of their children. We can scour the research from multiple cultural settings, and what we come to know is that if men do the things, the hands-on caregiving, we matter as much in the lives of children as women do. Now, I wouldn't say that to my spouse all the time, because there is we can have some little scuffles around who matters, but really we do matter equally, apart from the breastfeeding part. Men can do all those things that we've been trying to tell women that we don't know how to do. We can clean up, we can nurture, we can wake up in the middle of the night to soothe a child. We can wipe spittle off and all the other excretions that come out. We are able to do it. I think, Kate, you were saying this as well. We also know from data that men are as biologically primed to care for others as women are. We know from some studies in various parts of the world that when men are in close contact with babies, our hormonal mix changes too. We become more attuned to the child in front of us. We kind of focus our energies as women do, particularly during breastfeeding, but many other moments as well. We can do that kind of attention, that kind of close nurturing that small children in particular need. We also know from all the data that kind of any indicator we look at, 2 caregivers is better than 1. Certainly single mothers, single fathers, single caregivers can do a fantastic job, and we know lots of those stories. But odds are 2 people who are crazy about you, and that to me is the best definition as a child development specialist, the best definition of a caregiver is someone who is crazy about that child, puts the needs of that child in front of their own. We know that 2 is better than 1. 3 can also work. 2 women, 2 men, any combinations of 2s and 3s seem to work pretty well. In fact, the heterosexual majority of the world could even learn quite a bit from same-sex couples, which studies show, and we cite those here as well, actually have gotten over the baggage of what men are supposed to do and women are supposed to do a lot sooner than heterosexual couples have, for very good reasons. So we hold that these recommendations around the importance of fathers and multiple caregivers hold up for heterosexual as well as same-sex families, and we think, again, I will repeat, that we have something to learn as heterosexual families from what same-sex partners and parents have learned a long time ago. Next one. We also know that engaged fatherhood matters tremendously for empowering women and girls. Whether it's the time use issue that we've talked about before, we know that one of the huge issues that keeps women's wages low, we know that one of the reasons that women are overrepresented in the 1 in 2 workers in the world who work in either informal or precarious settings, women are overrepresented there because they do that greater share of the care work, first and foremost. We know that, as we've heard before, how do we get women into the workplace the ways that they want and earning the income they deserve is by sharing the care work. We also know that girls who have, or daughters who have involved fathers are more likely to have higher aspirations later on. We know from some research they're less likely to be subject to sexual coercion or sexual assault. We know that boys who see involved fathers are more likely to repeat those patterns when they have children of their own. This is one of those win-win, pay-forward investment things that lots of donors, governments, and foundations should be looking for. So we will repeat that message quite a bit, that this does pay forward. Next, please. We also need, and we see as intimately connected to fatherhood, the need to engage men in sexual and reproductive health. UNFPA has certainly been leading the charge for many years talking about this, and it is disturbing to report kind of where we still are in the world. And Kate, I may be stealing some of your numbers here, but we know that 40% of births worldwide are unintended. We know that 220 million women lack access to contraceptives, and we know that shamefully, men are only 75% of the world's contraceptive use, and that number women are 75%, men are only 25%, and that number has remained stubbornly the same for more than 20 years. We do affirm and say to the world's fathers that men are responsible in part of conception as well. You can find that here, that is confirmed, and therefore we do think they need to be part of the reproductive and sexual health process as well. This is not at all about talking about engaging men in controlling women's lives. It is about men being part of supporting women in their choices of all kinds in terms of reproductive and sexual rights, but that we also take the step to encourage our sons to see themselves as reproductive beings from the beginnings of sexuality education and talking to them about what we expect for their future. Next one, please. We also need men involved in maternal and child health. We have seen amazing progress in the last 20 years in terms of women's access to services, technological advances that are saving women's lives during childbirth, are seeing that our rates of child mortality are also declining in many parts of the world, but we're not tapping into the social technology nearly enough that we find over and over and over again. If there are supportive male partners involved, women are more likely to get the services they need, and children are more likely to get the health services that they need. We've kind of looked at that issue over and over again, but we affirm examples. We're thrilled to see that a few countries have seen how much that works, that they're taking it to a national level. I'm proud to say as a honorary Brazilian, if I can say that, from all of our work in Brazil, that Brazil may be the first country in the world that has a men's prenatal visit and protocol, which is taking to a nationwide scale, getting men involved from the start, getting them to come for their own health needs, but also to focus on the needs of their family and their child. Rwanda and some other countries are following suit. We think there are ways that these kinds of policies can be taken to scale. Next, please. And of course, we also need to talk about violence. How engaged fatherhood, how men's equal share of caregiving is part of reducing the scourge of violence globally. We know that 1 in 3 women will face violence from a male partner. We know from some studies that up to 3 in 4 children experience some form of harsh punishment or physical violence in the home. And we know that involved fatherhood needs to be part of breaking those cycles. Boys who see their fathers use such violence are 2.5 to 3 times more likely to use it. Girls who see that are more likely to be involved in violent relationships later on. We know that one of the drivers of mothers' use of violence against children is the unequal care burden. We've got data that shows that where the care burden is more equalized, there's less violence in the home. So another way that this pays forward and that we've got data about is the issue of violence. And that takes me to the last point. Move on, please. Last one. Again, we've got to get back to the issue of time. It's not very encouraging that one of our conclusions as we look at the data out there is that we're not approaching equality in time use in any kind of light speed. In fact, as we look at data from the last 30 years and at the individual countries, it looks like it would probably take us about 80 years to achieve something like equality in time use. I think all of us in the room are not quite content with an 80-year time span to achieve that equality. Hence, one of the reasons we think this report, and we hope it gets used and carried and weighs people's backpacks down, in addition to getting downloaded many, many, many times. We heard the mentions of the need for paternity leave. Go to the next slide here, the kinds of things that we need to move ahead on this. We know that we've got to filter down from some of the wealthiest places in the world to get paternity leave and other kinds of support to the lowest income families. That includes subsidized daycare, that includes access to dignified work, and work that pays enough to support families and that it enables men to be involved the way they want to be involved, training from the start of maternal and child health, national campaigns that use shamelessly positive pictures of men being close to babies and children as a way to get the message out in the film that you're about to see as well, and that we need, and I'll go back to the issue of we need a global target. The things that we measure that we as a planet have been pretty good at, including the Millennium Development Goals, we've put goals out there. Let us see a goal that says we will not accept a planet that's anything less than equality in terms of who does the care work. And that means starting with our sons and our daughters and saying from the very start that caregiving is not a male thing or a female thing, but it is quite a human thing. Thanks very much.
How about that for a great first half? It's going to be hard to beat, but it's going to happen, and we're going to continue. But before we get to the film that Gary was talking about, I wanted to thank Chelsea Clinton for the opening remarks today. I would like to thank Kate Gilmore also for the keynote address. And I'd like to thank Gary Barker for the report itself and for sharing some of the highlights from it. So again, a big round of applause for all three. And with that, we now have a film to show you from Promundo. Please enjoy.
Being a father means being there to teach a kid. Being a father means being supportive, being a role model,
just an educator, a navigator, a soother, a listener. Being a dad is quite tough, actually.
With my grandpa, and dad. He loves me and he takes care of me.
Jadi sebetulnya ketika istri saya sedang mengandung, itu adalah proses dari diri saya untuk mencari apa arti menjadi seorang ayah.
El papá se tiene que involucrar fuertemente en su embarazo.
Tanto el tema de todos, tanto el tema de miedo, tanto el tema de momentos especiales, que se entienda la bebé.
I see the difference from being a dad from being a mother. Seeing the life is not only a woman's responsibility.
ও যেন ততটাই আমাকে সাপোর্ট দিচ্ছে, যেটা আমার কাছে মনে হয় যে
Los dos tuvimos a alguien en nuestro organismo.
뭔가를 주시고 싶고 건강을 위한 아바한테 그런 거로
me ayuda a hacer las tareas.
y cariñoso con mis hijos, dedicar mucho tiempo.
Cada segundo, cada milisegundo, cada minuto lo aprovecho para estar conmigo.
Eu não acho que eu faço bastante. Eu acho que eu passo muito mais tempo no trabalho do que eu passo com meus filhos, por exemplo. Eu acho que isso hoje é um problema que muitas famílias têm que lidar.
Work. That's what limits me from spending time with my children.
Do I wish to have enough paid leave myself? Of course, yes.
It will be the best thing that could ever happen to anyone. It will be a good government to be able to do this.
It would be recognition of the importance of this work.
আমি আমার ছোটবেলার অভিজ্ঞতা থেকে বলতে পারি আমি ছোটবেলায় দেখেছি কখনো কখনো আমার বাবা হচ্ছে আমার মার গায়ে হাত দিয়েছে negativity when it brings negativity.
A violência traz trauma da vida das crianças. Impactos que se ven a corto plazo, mediano plazo y largo plazo.
সেখান থেকে আমি শিখেছি যে না এটা সম্ভব না এটা করা উচিত না এটা করা হবে না
Saya membayangkan memiliki seorang anak itu adalah menciptakan generasi yang lebih baik.
Well, when they're growing up, I hope they remember all the good times we had together and all the fun things we did. I hope they remember me as a loving father.
Gostaria que meus filhos, quando adultos, recordassem de mim enquanto pessoa que fez de tudo, dependendo das minhas possibilidades, para que fossem bons homens e boas mulheres.
They will describe me as such a father that was supportive, encouraging, sensitive, and responsible.
I try hard to be with that. I may stumble at times, but I try hard every day.
What did you all think? We're going to put that on loop. You're going to put it on your phone. You're going to watch it all the way home. In addition to that, what's great about the State of the World's Fathers report is that, as you see on your seat, you have this. The executive summary. You can fold it in half. You really can put it in your back pocket. And I challenge all of you just to keep it with you for 24 hours. Because if you have it with you for 24 hours, you might pull some of the amazing learnings out of it. I sat with the PDF version of it for about 48 hours. And as I was mentioning earlier, there's so many interesting things that have popped out from it. Gary, thanks again for that report, and we will hear from some of the other authors a little bit later. We now move into a panel discussion on the topics that were broached both by our opening speaker, our keynote speaker, as well as the key findings that were brought up. And I'd like to introduce to you the individuals to my right, and they are a very esteemed group. And I will start with Giselle Carino. She is the Deputy Regional Director, International Planned Parenthood. We then have next to her, Yannick Lemarek, Deputy Executive Director for Policy and Program at UN Women. We also have Elena Carlson, the Director of Child Protection Initiative, Save the Children, all the way at the end. And then Michael Sneed, right next to her, he is the Vice President, Global Corporate Affairs, Johnson & Johnson. Now I encourage all of my panelists here to enjoy this conversation, and given that I work in cable news, I enjoy interaction. So you can, interrupt each other, be nice, but please feel free to talk about any of the topics and to add as you like. And please keep your answers short, because although we do have room until 6, I think we have to end this by 5, unfortunately. Is that right, Alexa? And we also have a timekeeper too. So let me start with this, and I'll start with you, Giselle. What do you think about the report? Oh, right there.
Perfect. I love it. And I love it because it helps us begin a conversation with a different framework. I come from the feminist movement. So for us, men engagement was something working from abortion and gender-based violence was something not easy to embrace, not very easily, and as a movement we have had trouble doing that. But what I loved the most was that really it could be a political manifesto. Mm-hmm. Page 47, for those of you who want to go through the report, it really talks that this is an issue of social justice, of economic justice, and therefore a social development issue. And it gives you a roadmap. Everything is not one solution. Everything you have to tackle to be able to address this issue involves us all. And I felt very energized, as you can tell, by only going through the pages. And I love to see that happening in reality.
Which sentence do you like on 47?
Very last paragraph.
It's all great. Finally, right? Restricted agendas.
Yes,
fantastic.
exactly.
That is great. So tell me, Giselle, that was a great way of discussing the report. Lena, what do you think of the report?
Yeah, I also think it's a great
report because it brings all the evidence together on the important role that fathers play and can play in the lives of children, and it also has a lot of concrete examples from different parts of the world on how father can be engaged in very sort of concrete also policy recommendations that we can use in our advocacy with the government.
And by the way, all panelists, you can leave your mics open so that way you don't have to hit the button on and off, and we can pipe in whenever we want. And I think that'll make it easier for everybody. Yannick, what surprised you about this report? All, is it 200? Nope, 400? Is that right? 400 pages? Yeah, all 400 pages. What surprised you in it?
We have been waiting for that long to get such a report. We are in 2015, and it's the first World Father report. And for me, this report is critical because it's a key building block to make sure that my sons are not to hear what I heard when I was expecting my first son. I went to see my administration to inquire about parental leave, and I was told, don't you know that men do not deliver? And so it's about that.
And it is. When we look at this, Michael, from the corporate perspective, what can you do with this report?
Yeah, I think it actually confirms a lot of what corporations have been thinking about and actually putting in policies to actually start to address. So one of the things we've done at Johnson & Johnson is recently we've actually upgraded our parental leave policy for mothers, for parents, for adoptive parents, and at this point it's at 17 weeks. So Chelsea Clinton talked about not weeks but months, and at Johnson & Johnson we've now got a policy that extends 17 weeks, and it's very flexible too. So it allows people to take that time whenever they need it. And it's really a reflection of the fact that, as the report talks about, we want to raise strong families. We want to make sure that the family unit, however it's comprised, has that time to bond with their children. And so I think it's not just Johnson & Johnson, but leading corporations throughout the world are recognizing that these policies have a material impact on society, but ultimately they have a material impact on how we produce and how we move forward economically as countries and nations. So I think it actually is a great roadmap in terms of how we can move forward.
Describe to me why the majority of institutions here in the United States do not have paternity leave, from what you know.
Yeah, I think it's based upon maybe misconceptions and outmoded thinking, frankly. One of the things that you have a lot of companies that started a long time ago and yet to remain relevant and to remain sustainable, you've got to develop policies that are appropriate for the 21st century. And that includes policies that are appropriate for the 21st century family. And we know that families today in the 21st century, they look very different. They're composed very differently. I know personally, I'm a biological father. I'm also an adoptive father. And so the definition changes. And so companies have really got to kind of step up and lead the way. And too often, it's companies are sitting in the background, but more and more civil society organizations such as the ones we partner with, like Save the Children, they are expecting the private sector to be at the forefront or with them as we take these steps.
To the rest of the panelists, from your vast experience, as well as the data that's in front of us, what country, what polity do you look to when we're talking about the role that fathers must play and this issue that we are talking about today, how men must take on half of the child care, half of the domestic work? What country do you look to say, that's something we should look to, that's a best practice?
The report takes great care, actually, not to rank countries and not to single out a best country. And I'm afraid that we do the same thing. But we can speak about some of the best policies. And it's clear that parenting leave is extraordinarily important, non-transferable parenting leave. And in every single country where you have had a very strong policy in favor of parenting leave, actually men and fathers have reacted very positively and have engaged. And this has been a critical element to promote gender equality and women empowerment.
Lena, I want to ask you this. The impact that an involved nonviolent fatherhood might have here on the protection of the rights of the child. Talk about that, as well as on children's development as it goes through time, the outcomes that come from that.
Yes, that is extremely important, because also what the research tells us that a boy that experiences violence in the home, witnesses violence or experiences violence, is more likely to become violent when he grows up, and a girl who witness domestic violence are more at risk to end up in a violent relationship when she grows up. And we also know that violence breeds violence. So a non-violent father is extremely important, not only to protect children from violence, but also for children's education, for children's health. And there are many examples and data in this report that demonstrate this.
How do you mitigate that? How do you mitigate that problem of violence in the home coming from the father?
That's right. So I mean, there are different issues that you can do. Of course, having legislation is important, but even more important is to change the social norms that accept violence and to work from a community-based approach with both fathers and mothers, and having support systems in the place like counseling, but also positive parenting that also teach fathers and mothers to raise children without using violence. So like a combination of laws and policies and community-based practical approaches. Like, for example, somebody mentions the father schools, where fathers are also taught about child development and non-violent ways of teaching the children. And equally, of course, violence against women is also extremely, extremely important to address, because it also goes hand in hand.
Hey, Richard.
Yeah.
Alina, one of the things to that point, I know one of the things that we're doing at Johnson & Johnson, we have a project with CARE, one of the leading organizations focused on global poverty in Sri Lanka. And we have a project called Renew, which is redefining norms to empower women. And it's all about trying to engage men about how to redefine norms and how to engage socially around gender-based violence, reducing that, around gender inequality. So I think kind of projects like that, even in small scales, if we can then prove them and scale them, is another good example of what you're asking
And
about.
looking for best practices. And that's a great way to get to Giselle here. And Giselle, as we look at engaging men in sexual reproductive health and rights, what are some of those programs, those ideas that you've seen out there that have worked well?
Well, I want to repeat some of what my colleague has said. Engaging men is a long life process, right? That begins probably with comprehensive sexuality education. In our case, we we saw last year about 500,000 youth working there with gender dynamics, what it means, what are good models, helps them create and imagine a different type of life for themselves and their partners and their families. And I think it's very well proven. It has a lot of implications in the sexual and reproductive health outcomes of both women and men. And we also know that there are different types of comprehensive sexuality education. When it's good, the outcomes are much greater, particularly in relationship to diminishing unwanted pregnancies and STIs. And you know, we keep saying the right of every child is to be wanted. And men have a key role to play in making that happen, very much so. As I said, we have had a hard time as a movement to embrace this because we sometimes feel that we can't engage men in sexual and reproductive health decisions, particularly in contraception decisions,
right.
Without hindering on the autonomy of women. And we actually can. We have examples. We can do that. We have to do that at scale. Eh?
Give me an example of that, because I know one of the thoughts that you have, and you've articulated it so well. How does those two roles in the family unit, 1 + 1, help each other to take on that responsibility, take on that knowledge, and be able to support each other in the space you're talking about?
Yeah, I think we, coming from the social civil society movement, you know, we particularly providing services, we have a key role to play, as I said, providing education. Men, 10 years ago when I began working in violence, you hardly saw men coming in. Now women and men come together, and we have to make an effort as organizations, as providers of health services, to engage them in the conversation. If they're already coming. Not only sometimes for women's contraception, but for their own needs as well. I think we also have a key role to play. You know, I come from a region, Latin America and the Caribbean, of great laws and policies, very little implementation. So I think civil society has a key role to play in holding governments accountable, in making sure this actually happens in the reality of women. This has a budget attached to it, because you put your money where you care, right? And this is a sustainable effort that way. So I think we as a civil society have had in the movement a lot of experience in making this happen, and we should take this opportunity to embrace this dialogue and partner with other organizations that are helping us move the agenda forward.
Yannick, you know, as we have the benefit today of being able to talk about this issue with Giselle, Elena, and Michael here, all of you here as well. It feels like this decade is seeing a crescendo of energy behind this discussion. It feels like just an upswell in the last 10 years. Am I wrong? And if I am wrong, tell me why. And if I'm right, why are we seeing this, this oomph?
Well, I'm afraid you will have a number of different answers on that one, because I'm not so sure there is a consensus. We are, over the past 20 years since the Beijing platform of action, we have seen a steady improvement, but we are very, very far from the rate of progress that we will need to see if we want to achieve gender equality by 2030. So we are definitely seeing progress, and if I look at my own experience, it's quite dramatic, but we will have to definitely step up efforts before we can feel comfortable about our rate of progress.
What is one of the efforts that you would hope to accomplish this year?
I think it's, for example, the UN Women works on 3 different types of activities: women economic empowerment, women political empowerment, and eliminations of violence against women. And actually, if I had one wish,
I'll give it to you, maybe.
If I had one wish, actually changing promoting positive construction of masculinity could actually be enough to dramatically increase the rate of progress. Because we know that unpaid care, domestic and care work is one of the major barriers to women economic empowerment. We know that it's also one of the major barriers to political empowerment, and we know that it's one of the main factors of masculinity, but one of the main factors of elimination of violence. So actually, if we could promote through initiatives such as this one, positive model of masculinity, we could dramatically increase the rate of progress.
And part of that idea of masculinity, Yannick, that you're talking about, as it's the entire panel, is the idea there of partners. Talk about sexual orientation, talk about same-sex partners amidst all of this important topic of fatherhood to the entire panel, whoever would like to discuss that.
Yeah, I think part of that is, embedded in your question, is this idea that social norms are changing. And I think people, particularly men, I think as they see those norms changing, it actually probably is a relief that they can actually feel more comfortable doing the things that perhaps they felt restricted because of expectations that have been put on them. But as you see
the four walls around what masculinity might be moving.
But as you see that changing, as you see the definition of families changing, as you see generations of fathers saying, look, this is okay, or just demonstrating. There's nothing as powerful as a role model. And as that gets reinforced, I think it gives younger people, other boys, men, the greater confidence to just kind of be themselves. So I don't think it's that far away, but I tend to be have a more positive perspective. But I do think this idea of social norming and recognizing that whatever is norm for you is going to be okay. And that's a very powerful concept.
It is very powerful. And as we see this, Lena, and we look at the role of children and how they can affect other children around them, something that I found very, very inspiring was a gentleman called John in El Salvador, and I was there for Planned International USA's Because I'm a Girl campaign. And what he decided to do after school every single day was to put on the pink t-shirt for Because I'm a Girl and hold these little sessions with 6 or 7 people and talk to them, these other boys that are teenagers in high school, that there is a role to be played, because he had a girlfriend. He was worried that his girlfriend, if she became pregnant, she would be treated as a pariah. And he decided that's not acceptable. And he stood out there. He got called all sorts of names. But the role of what a child can do also, very early on, to reinforce what you're talking, all 4 of you are talking about, is so important. So Lena, talk about that role and what children can do around the world to change this dynamic, those 4 walls.
Yeah, I think children can do a lot, and they're also doing a lot already. So we work a lot with consulting children and involving them in our work. And they always talk about gender discrimination as being one of the hindering factors for children to have all the rights at hand. And they also tell us that we also meet, for example, boys who are working very, very hard to change gender discrimination and violence against children. And they also tell us about the importance role models they had in their fathers, how their fathers promoted equal right for boys and girls, how the fathers helped with domestic works, etc. So children are also a very important change agent in the society. And we also hear equal from girls, how important it was in the homes that actually the fathers also helped with the domestic work, because that led to that girl had to do less. Because we also know that that's a hindering factor for girls to go to school, to achieve well in school, that she has to do this domestic work. So we really need to partner with children and young people to have more changes in the society, and they are sort of really willing to do that together with us.
I just want something, if you let me. It took me a while to grapple with this question, but I think one thing we learned from the report, and it's very well put there, is that it's no one approach. It's a number of approaches that help move the agenda, move change forward. The other one, I think probably a focus on youth seems to be important, given that we are facing the largest young generation ever. That intuitively seems to be a way in which you could really make some progress there. And the third one I wanted to add is really a call to donors. We are facing a very fragmented approach to the work. When you work in violence for women, although the risk factors violence against children are the same, and therefore the strategies to address them the same, funding doesn't come that way. And there is another complication, which is that changing social norms is not a one-year deal, right? So as a donor, you have to think through long term. And that has been difficult. And I think we have to make a special call to really think through this in a much bigger way. No?
I would like to fully second this opinion. if we want to change the fathers of tomorrow, we have to work with the children and the adolescents of today. And we have to recognize it's a generational issue. It's easier to shape and transform the values of children and adolescents than basically fairly well-entrenched adults.
From all of our panelists, I'd like for you to answer with one sentence if you can, maybe two. Tell me what you've learned about this space in the last year. You've really been doing this here for a good portion of your careers and lives. But interesting to me might be, what have you learned anew in the last year? Who would like to start?
I think for me personally, but also for Johnson & Johnson, I think we've learned the power of just getting things started. You know, things have a way because of the technology today, because of the social sphere in which we all operate, that even small things can get amplified and get replicated. And there is a world that's much more willing to socialize and share than ever before. And I think even those small things, we're amazed at the impact that we can have. Small ideas that quickly scale.
A lot of commas and semicolons in that, but that was 2 sentences. Who's next? Lena?
Yeah. So I think something that we really learned is that we thought that we were quite gender equal in our work. So we did actually, through one of our authors here, a mapping of our programs, and it shows that our programs are very traditional. We mostly reached mothers, unless there was a concerted effort to reach fathers. So to make change, we really to have that gender transformative approach in everything we do, starting with children and young people, working through a life cycle approach, and also working with mothers and fathers.
On my side, what I've learned is that policy works and policy are not gender neutral. And even macroeconomic policies that seems to be totally gender neutral are actually definitely pro or against gender equality. And policies will work in the sense that if there is a bias against gender equality in your policy, this bias will be reinforced.
That's okay. I like all four of you, so go ahead. Go ahead, Giselle.
I think we have a key role to play in comprehensive sexuality education, scaling that up, in service provision certainly, and I welcome the push to really begin a bigger dialogue. Sometimes as a movement we talk among ourselves, and in order to make change here, we need to talk to others. And broaden. And
is that what you learned in the last year?
Absolutely. Broaden it really much. And particularly because the paragraph I really like about this being a social development issue.
What page?
I'm
joking.
47.
47. Back to 47. That's going to be the most dog-eared page.
Absolutely. We have to go different here.
I like that. Perfect. Okay, great. So now I'd like to make it a little bit more difficult. And so we've got the title, The State of the World's Fathers, right? I want you to describe to me in one word, what is the state of the world's fathers? This is all for my fellow social media folk out there. I'm helping you out here, right? I'm trying. So give me one word to describe the state of the world's fathers.
Hopeful.
Thank you. Hopeful. Giselle.
Our language.
Oh, it's okay. Giselle. Venga. It can be español, sí?
Challenging.
Challenging, okay.
And yet hopeful.
Dash, dash, dash. You like?
Underestimated.
Underestimated. Lena.
Improving.
Improving.
I have another one.
Oh, okay. Bonus.
A combination.
Okay, bonus.
Worth it.
Worth it. Dash. I like it. I like it. Worth it. You know, as we look at the efforts that have been made over the decades, this report and this discussion by no means, as all four of you know, as all of you know here in this room, and those who are watching this as we stream this discussion, it does not negate, it does not forget, it does not look over all of the foundation of the efforts behind feminism, the efforts behind gender equality to this date. This adds just another fantastic layer to it, doesn't it? And tell me how that works in now. So we add this other layer to this tree that's getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
It's definitely not in lieu, it's in complement. And for example, if you look at this issue of unpaid domestic and care work, one of the key instruments is basically investment in social infrastructure and services, investment in water supply and sanitation, investment in energy access, investment in child care services. So that will be critical if we want to do something in that field. But even in countries that have basically invested handsomely in social infrastructure and services, we haven't yet reached gender equality in terms of unpaid domestic and care work, because the missing piece is this one, the change in social norms, and the engagement of the men.
I think the concept is partnership. I look at what we've done with the Millennium Development Goals, and we're focused on goals 4 through 6. Obviously, very focused on women empowerment, but we also recognize that you've got to have father engagement, you've got to have male engagement, and you've got to have community engagement. So, to some degree, yes, those are important, but you don't actually get to the end line unless there's real partnership between men and women in this space.
And I also think it helps us to work holistically. If I look at the child and how we can help children thrive, develop, and learn, we really need to have to work with both fathers and mothers and address gender equality, which is like such a hindering factor. And also, we get more and more evidence that demonstrates that we cannot be effective unless we also involve boys and men and fathers in our work.
Giselle, talk about that.
I get very upset when I read again that we as women make about 24% of what men make for the same jobs. But I also get very hopeful when I see a solution there. And it's sharing the domestic work. I love that.
Starts at home, right? What you're saying?
Exactly, it starts very close. So I see that, again, it's a challenge, it's a big challenge, involves us all, but I'm very hopeful and it's definitely worth it. So I feel very confident we will move forward as a movement in making change here.
I just love the energy up here. It's so
Come on,
positive. No, I love it. Everyone's so positive. It's great. Since we're so positive, I want you all to make a wish. Yannick already made a wish, so I got yours. What's that one wish that you would ask for now? Michael?
Richard, you're putting me on the spot here.
I did. Hi.
Let's see, 5 words or less. Actually, I know you like hashtags. I wish for the report to have an impact that we've never seen before.
Nina?
I wish to see a world where there is no violence against women and children, and I think this report and the recommendation can help us get
One
there.
wish. That's great. Giselle, one wish.
I wish to see this report used to shape public debate in the region I come from, and to really accompany change that I'm sure will be able to happen. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. All three. Jan, do you want to add to your wish or have another one? I'll give you a bonus wish.
I can tell you the wish of my agency. It's to put the termination date on the gender inequality by 2030.
2030.
2030.
Okay, Father's Day is this coming Sunday. I want to also get your advice, and we will finish with this. What either fathers can do differently on this Sunday, what mothers can do differently on this Sunday, with the idea behind what we've all talked about for the last 45 minutes. What's the one thing that can be done this weekend? Something that's practical, that folks can do.
Read the report.
Read the report. Happy Father's Day, Dad. Here you go. Right there. Actually, it would be a thumb drive, though, right? It'll be a thumb drive. Happy Father's Day, Dad.
I actually think spending time with your, I have 3 children, but spending time with my children, talking to them about the importance of being a father and why it's so important to me personally.
Have a discussion is what you're saying.
Yeah.
And I would say the same, have a discussion with your children and also ask them, what more can I do as a father and mother to be there for you?
That is great. Would any of you like to have a final thought as we finish here? Wow. I normally have panelists that love to elucidate, shall we say. And so
Maybe
thank
a round of applause for facilitator.
Well, Elena, Michael, Yana, Giselle, one word to describe all of you, and that is just fantastic. So thank you all for your remarks today and for sharing your wisdom. Again, thank you all. Now, with that, we have closing remarks from Dean Peacock, the Executive Director of Sonke Gender Justice. We also have Nikki van der Vaart, report author and author of Feminism and Men. We also have Michael Kaufman, report author. These are all the authors of this fantastic report, and co-founder of the White Ribbon Campaign. We also have Ruthie Leptoff, report author, and Ben Care, co-coordinator with Promundo. So please welcome all four of them. Are here. Now we know who we are.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really delightful to be here. And I have the honor of making brief closing remarks and then turning it over to the people who have written the report that you have in front of you. Our vision here is really about gender equality and social justice. So I would be remiss as a South African today not to make a few remarks that I think are pertinent to some of the challenges we have. I think we can all relate and empathize with Babatunde Shotaman, the Executive Director of UNFPA, who, like many of us, was left feeling rather ill by the proceedings of the African Union. My country, South Africa, failed to implement a court order issued by our own very high court to arrest President Bashir from Sudan. Our vision here today is one in which we hold men accountable for their violence and in which we encourage and support those men to find new ways of being in their families and in their relationships. And I just wanted to start, I think, in some ways by acknowledging the failure of my own government to live up to its commitments. Fortunately, I woke up to that very bad news, as all of you did this morning. But fortunately, we're here for really what is a celebration of an incredible report written by really fantastic visionary writers and activists. And it's a report that is already generating a lot of traction, and I'm going to talk about that very, very briefly. Importantly, it was a report that it was a delight to be a part of producing. Our colleagues at Promundo, Save the Children, Rutgers WPF, and my colleagues back home in South Africa at Sonke Gender Justice held and hold, I think, broad, ambitious goals. And it was really a delight to work with them. So I just want to start by acknowledging that and thanking them for the tremendously powerful and enjoyable experience. I want to touch briefly, though, on how this report is already generating traction. In South Africa, we have, as I think you know, some of the highest levels of men's violence against women, and in fact, some of the highest levels of violence against children of any country in the world. We also have very high levels of father absence, a direct legacy of our apartheid past that stripped men from their families and forced men to work as migrant laborers far from their families. This report is allowing us to engage our government to try and change some of that. It's given us the data that we need, it's given us bold arguments. And in South Africa at the moment, we're doing a lot of work to challenge corporal punishment in South Africa. In South Africa, we have a ban on corporal punishment in public institutions, but we don't yet have a ban on corporal punishment in the family. So we're working with our government and our parliamentarians to push through a ban which we hope to achieve this year, strengthen considerably by the arguments made in this report. Similarly, we are making the case to our government that we need expanded parenting leave. We need expanded parenting leave for women who currently have 4 months but need more. WHO recommends 6 months. Men in South Africa have 3 days of what's called family responsibility leave. That covers funerals and it covers a whole range of other obligations. We're asking that our government provide parenting leave for men as well. And lastly, we're also using this report to urge our government to hold men to their obligations to provide child support, maintenance, where they are not living with their partners. And so we are seeing this report have tremendous traction. We know that will be true across the Men Care Alliance and across the nearly 35 countries that make up the Men Engage Alliance. So it's tremendously exciting to be able to share that positive news with you. It's also very exciting to be able to just tell you a little bit about who has made this report possible. There are many people, many institutions, of course, so I'm going to run through them quickly. I want to start by thanking the speakers today and all the people who did very, very hard work to make this event possible. So I want to thank them. Also like to thank the many donors and funders who are listed in the report. There are too many to list now, so I'd encourage you to have a look. We're very, very grateful to them for their ongoing support. The report authors you've heard from Gary Barker a moment ago. You'll hear from Ruti Lefthoff, you'll hear from Nikki van der Gaag, and Michael Kaufman. Meg Green is the other author who was not able to be here today. Also very grateful to the many people who reviewed and contributed to the report. That includes Veronica Brown, Nina Ford, and Ryan Bowman. Alexa Hassing and Rebecca Ladbury did amazing work with communications and logistics. Really some of the best I've ever seen in my now quite long career in the NGO sector. So congratulations to you for that. And then also want to acknowledge the organizations that coordinate the Medicare campaign, Instituto Promundo, who have played really a visionary role for many, many years in trying to shift gender norms. And the organization I'm proud to represent here, Sonke Gender Justice, based in South Africa, Save the Children, and Rutgers WPF, based in the Netherlands. And also, of course, the many partner organizations in the 30 countries that make up the Medicare campaign. Today's event certainly would not have been possible without the support of the Clinton Foundation's No Ceiling the Full Participation Project, without our sterling partners at UN Women, particularly the He for She campaign, the UN Women's Solidarity Movement for Gender Equality, and then, of course, UNFPA represented today so capably by Kate Gilmore in the absence of Robert Chateaumain. And they too have been an ongoing partner to both Men Engage and the Men Care campaign. We're particularly grateful, as always, to Leila Sharafi for her efforts to make this event happen. And I think with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ruti, who is going to make some concluding remarks. So thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you, of course, for being here. Thanks.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you everyone for being here. This has been really exciting. I wanted to respond to Richard's question earlier about the state of the world's fathers. We've been thinking about this for a long time. The state of the world's fathers is changing. Good, bad, changing. So we feel very grateful and very privileged to be here in this space, to have the attention that this issue is getting. As was mentioned earlier, this report brings together perspectives and research and arguments from a lot of different stakeholders, I would say, that don't always talk to each other. Someone mentioned that earlier. They're not generally in conversation. So we have feminist economists and activists. We have reproductive and maternal health professionals, violence prevention advocates, and researchers and organizations that work on child rights and child protection. And I think one of the reasons that we can come together around these issues is that the issue of the unequal distribution of care work is one that affects all of us. It affects, the highly paid CEO here in New York City. It affects families around the world that are struggling to make ends meet and to figure out how to sort of finish their week and their day.
It affects, as we've heard, nuclear families, single-parent families, same-sex families, extended families. It affects every single one of us in this room. We all think about how we manage our day, who does what at home. This is, of course, an individual issue, so we see this resonate personally with a lot of people, but it's also a policy, a national, international issue that is urgent to address. I have to say, in my work as the Men Care co-coordinator, in thinking about seeing what countries are doing around these issues, how much the issue resonates for people. And it doesn't just affect us now. So we've heard a lot about this intergenerational transmission of violence. People have mentioned it, the importance of working with intersections of violence against women and violence against children. But we've also heard, and we show strongly in the report, that working with children, that changing what we do in the home now affects future generations. So when we work together to address these inequalities, our lives become more equal and just now, and they become more equal and just for our children and for future generations. Thank you.
I'm also delighted to be here. It's really, really exciting to see so many people here at the end of what's been a 2-year process, I guess, since the idea first came about. I'm really glad too that I'm not at the end of Richard's questioning, and that I've just got a few things that I want to say. I'm hoping you won't ask us. There's another group that I'd like to thank, a group that makes up 50% of the population of the world, and that is women. Black and white, old and young, rich and poor, from every country in the world. Without the work of many thousands of small women's organisations and groups, we wouldn't be here today. They've changed the world far beyond their grandmother's wildest dreams, and they still need our support, and it's really important that we remember that too in this discussion about fathers. As a feminist, I believe firmly that in order for women to move forward, however, and all too often there are also backward steps, there's another piece of the jigsaw, and that's men. We've had that said already this afternoon. Women have changed so much. You guys haven't really changed nearly as much as we have. It's time for men to make those changes, to give up power so that they have equality, but women have equality, to stop violence with campaigns like the White Ribbon, to support their daughters' education, to lobby for family-friendly policies. I've seen through writing the report and researching it how fatherhood really does have the potential for change. It's a moment in a man's life where he's rethinking so many different things, and they're thinking about how he can care, how he can show emotion, how he can stand up for what is right. But that window does close quite quickly. It's a potential window that isn't open forever, and it needs to be exploited at that time. So before a man becomes a father, starting very early and in those first crucial months, as well as when he's bringing up his children. But the pressures and social norms around what it means to be a man often are the things that make that window close. So I want to ask you a question, or ask you something. I would like each and every one of you, women and men, but especially men, to do their utmost to ensure that the potential of fatherhood is fulfilled, so that we can build a better world for all of us. Thank you very much.
And thank you to Nikki, who, this was her idea. She was the person who said, we should do a State of the World's Fathers report. So particular thanks to you. Well, seldom in one person's life can any of us say, I'm witnessing something positive that will change the whole world. Seldom can we say, I'm witnessing human life itself being reshaped. The feminist revolution is, of course, one such sweeping change, but it's also exactly what brings us together today. The beginnings of a worldwide upheaval in what it means to be a father. That's that's going around us. That's what propelled this report. And in turn, that upheaval in what it means to be a father both requires and will promote a transformation in our very ideals of manhood and the practices of men's power over women, over children, and the power of some men over other men. Now that makes the launch of the State of the World's Fathers, an exciting moment, especially for those of us here who for the past 20, 30, 35 years have said that we must engage men and boys to promote gender justice, who believe that this is something that we could actually achieve in our own lifetimes. Now, many of us here in this room, women and men, will continue working to engage men and boys, to end men's violence, to support girls' education, to reduce the spread of HIV/AIDS, to support women's reproductive rights, and much more. But what we are discovering right now is that in fatherhood, in this little nugget, all these critical issues actually come together. They come together in many different ways. We know that the transformation of fatherhood is critical for women's rights, for gender justice, for equality in the workplace, and equality in the home. We know that the transformation of fatherhood is critical for the rights and well-being of children. And we know that although it definitely means much more work for men, this is something that is critical for the health, the well-being, and the happiness of men. As Gary and I have written, the transformation of fatherhood, we believe, will be for men what feminism is and will be for women. Our goal together today is clear. Men must do 50% of the care work on the planet, and we must do it in a loving, respectful, and nonviolent way. We're not there yet, but I can tell you for certain, we are on our way. Thank you very much.
Thank you for those closing remarks. I appreciate Dean, Nikki, Michael, Ruzi. What great work. I think everybody in this room is glad that you did this and is smiling a little bit wider today. And I want to suggest to all of you, as our panelists and our speakers have done today, which is consider sending the support to somebody in advance to this Father's Day. One more enlightened person. One person with a little bit more data behind what they're saying. Some more information about what they're thinking before this Sunday comes around. And with that, thank you all for being here. I appreciate all of our distinguished panelists, our distinguished delegates, as well as guests, the excellencies who are here today, and of course all of you, ladies and gentlemen, who made this a very good discussion and something that we will not forget in the unveiling of the State of the World's Fathers 2015. Thank you all.